Indeed, morning at NTV, and we are live from Kampala Serena Conference Center. I'm Andrew Chamagedo. Now, we still have another member of parliament that happens to be from, that is Colin North, Honorable Sam Opio. A member of parliament is with my colleague Stephen Mbide talking about this entire money of emyooga. Stephen? Mr.
Thank
Mbide?
you so much, Andrew Chamagero. This, yes, Stephen Mbide of Pepeswe Chibuga. Of course, when you talk about money, there is, for those who believe in philosophy, there is a philosopher, right, called George Bernard Shaw. He said that money is the root of all evil. But for those who believe in the Bible, the Christians say that in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, it says that money is the source of the root of all evil. But George Bernard says lack of money. But when you talk about money, there is confusion, there is fighting, there is abuse of money, and that is why we're talking about money this morning. I'm here with Honorable Dr. Samuel Opio Achuti, the Member of Parliament for Colin North. They're up in the northern Lango region, and you are talking about money, especially the emyooga funds. How did the Lango sub-region or Lango region get the money? They get the money. The people benefit from the money. The people benefit from this program. Honorable Samuel Opio, welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you, and thank you all the listeners and viewers for tuning in.
On 2nd September, you watched you on TV delivering a report on behalf of all the MPs of Lango region about how this money was dispersed, the process, the registration, and the beneficiaries. Let's begin with an overview. How was the process of dispersing emyooga funds?
Yeah, first and foremost, we need to understand what this emyooga was about. It was basically an intervention to strengthen financial inclusion of the people in the informal sector. We have the carpenters, we have the tailors, we have the market vendors, women entrepreneurs, mechanics, taxi operators. They have been complaining for a very long time that it's very difficult for them to access capital to start or even to expand their business itself. So the target groups was really a good idea. The approach to say, let's create this fund which these people can be able to access will really, really be a great idea. However, the biggest challenge came in that the design was flawed. The process was rushed and the timing was wrong because it came in at the middle and the heat of a political campaign period. Because of that, many people decided to look at this more as a grant rather than a revolving fund, because emyooga is not a grant program. It is a revolving fund where you're supposed to borrow and you're able to repay, borrow and repay, and it was through that, but also you save to grow that pool of funds itself. So when you come to the aspect of the disbursements, this is where we found a very, very big issue. And that started really from the design, because in several cases, we found that the disbursements did not match the withdrawals. For example, in one of the associations, 16 million shilling was withdrawn. The money that actually reached the association was 5 million. And we found about 26 cases of similar instances where the money withdrawn and the money disbursed does not stand.
5 million out. First, let's go slowly. How much did the Lango region, rather Colin district, at least get for
So
this
if you
emyooga
come to
funds?
my district, for example, we received 1 billion 30 million shillings that was received for the 2 constituencies.
For how many groups?
These are for a total of 33 circles, because under the circles you have different groups that are created. So those were 33 circles, and this was supposed to be utilized by all the associations under those circles. The circles and the associations, when you add them up together, is more than 200 associations that were to be beneficiaries of those funds itself. So when we talk of 16 million, means one association out of those 200 borrowed, applied for a loan of 16 million. What was approved was 5 million. But what was withdrawn was 16 million shillings, and they received only 5 million. So a total of 11 million shilling was unaccounted for. And in just my constituent alone, we found in 26 instances, with a total of 131 million shillings that was missing, money that did not reach the beneficiaries, but was removed and withdrawn from
And where did this money go? When less was received, much was allocated, where did this money go?
This is the money that was fraudulently withdrawn. We engaged the circle leaders, we engaged the district commercial officers. We need to also understand that not a single coin could be withdrawn from a bank account without a recommendation letter from the district commercial officer authorizing withdrawal from that bank account. So they were literally signatories to those accounts. So they were in the know of the funds that were being withdrawn. But these funds that were withdrawn but they did not take the beneficiaries, they were diverted. They were basically stolen. These funds were stolen out of those accounts. They were fraudulent withdrawals. That's what we can basically describe it as is.
Okay, and when you talk about this money, we've seen not so many people being arrested. At least for Kole, there was a meeting that you held with the Woman MP for Kole district. We saw like few, I think 3 people who were arrested, but not so many across the Lango region or even across Uganda that we've seen these kind of arrests. We haven't seen so many people. We haven't seen much of the money being recovered. Where is the problem?
Yeah, you see, we also need to understand that the time period that was given for the oversight was just a 2 weeks period. And some of the regions were not able to go have a very in-depth review of what was happening on the ground. But remember that the reports are still coming up. So far, 2 sub-regions have reported. There are still other regions that are yet to report. But even in Lango sub-region, it's not only in Kole district. Even we had the Molata district, where we found that the RDC had actually created some ghost groups. And we also found that there had been a change of the focal person. The focal person is supposed to be the district commercial officer to be in charge of spearheading these efforts, but they had changed to someone else.
Did I hear that the Amolata RDC was suspended? Was put out of...
They had to go and make statements to the police on that matter itself, because we also found the funds are still in the account, more than 1 billion shillings in a Molata district, in a Leptom district. So the question comes, for 6 months, these funds have been in the account. You know, why haven't they been disbursed? Is it that the people are not able to comply and meet the requirements, or are there other issues itself? So we've seen these cases happening. But remember that the report hasn't yet been adopted by Parliament. And once the Parliament fully adopts it, there are going to be some, I'm sure there are going to be some key actions. One of the key actions we've highlighted is that the persons that were responsible for loss or theft of funds should be held accountable. So what you saw was just the initial part of it. I believe that there is more that is yet to come as far as this is concerned. But we also need to understand, and I really need to emphasize, to take you back a bit on the issue of the design of this process itself. And I always say, you know, you cannot design a very nice car, put the engine of a motorcycle, the tires of a bicycle, and expect it to move. The biggest challenges were faced at the registration, because we ended up having what were literally ghost groups. For example, how can you have a women entrepreneurs circle where the chairperson is a man? It's like having a district woman MP who is a man. It's supposed to be a lady. And this happened at all levels. They were registered at the sub-county, registered at the district, registered at the ministry. How could 3 levels of screening fail to detect? You don't need investigative capacity. This was an outright to understand that a name like Okello Jimmy Alex is a man, is not a lady, and can never be the chairperson of a women entrepreneur circle. But also, they were supposed to make efforts to ensure that the persons involved within these enterprises are actually those persons. Is this a mechanic? Is this a carpenter? We found a teacher who claimed to be part of the carpenter's circle, and we asked him about his carpentry skills or carpentry activities, and he could not explain, you know. So there was a lot of ghost groups, persons that did not fit in within those enterprises. That should have been the first step, to screen them out, so that the beneficiaries are people who are actually involved in those enterprises. And then secondly, they were not supposed to just give them the funds, but train them. If you're a carpenter, you should be given training as far as carpentry is concerned, mechanics is concerned, tailoring is concerned. That was a very big missing link. And so at the end of the day, when they were receiving this money, they were ill prepared to manage it. Even the recovery that you're talking about, the systems itself, whereas we're seeing some circles were paying back, but first of all, the recovery period was too short. 4 months is very, very difficult. You know, for somebody to start a business and be able to pay the full loan, you know, it was just not feasible. If you wanted it as 4 months, then you needed to reduce on the amount they could actually borrow to ensure they have that capacity to pay back. So we saw a very big gap when it comes into the recovery element itself. The duration was too short, and that impacted recovery.
Maybe does that explain why you say the reason or the timing was wrong, that we were going to an election? Maybe, yes, it would be outright right that maybe it was just to target them and entice them, because this money was approved in October by Parliament, the 170 billion to go out to various circles. But don't you think that maybe the politics also, it wasn't really intended to uplift the standards of the people, but also to gain just political capital?
Well, you see,
Which also one would say that maybe you also benefited from this.
You see, this was the design came in much earlier, and in October that's when Parliament approved it, and then the funds were disbursed in December. That is the heat of the political campaign.
Just a month to the elections.
You see, that is where I say the timing was wrong. They should have waited until the elections are done. Let the groups register. That is fine. But let the funds begin to come in after that whole process itself, because there was no rush. These mechanics are still there even up to now. The carpenters, the tailors, these are not professions or sectors or skilled labors that tomorrow will disappear. There was no urgency for a rush at that particular time itself. And so there should have been some delay period. But also when I say the timing also, it is not just about waiting for tomorrow then giving them the funds. There should have been some period to allow people to save, because the objective was to create also a saving culture, not just to give money, access to finances, but also build a saving culture so that you can build a pool of funds that you can and uplift the people. So we should look at what was the ultimate aim. The ultimate objective should have been that. But you see, because of that very short rushed process itself, what some of we found on the ground is several of the associations, what they simply did to comply to get the loan, because the requirement was you needed to save a third. So if you need 3 million, you needed 1 million. So what will somebody do? They went and borrowed 1 million shillings.
So what would you say that now that yes, the money is already in circulation, people are using it, people are abusing it, people are embezzling it, is this the same report that in the 9 districts of Lango region, Malota, Lila, or Tuke, and the rest, is this the same situation, the same report that is just showing these flaws within the emyooga funds disbursement?
So when you look at in terms of registration, this was cross-cutting. Many of these groups are actually not involved in the enterprises that have been highlighted. And when you actually look at in terms of the utilization of the funds, when you go deeper, you ask, so how was these funds borrowed? I borrowed it as an individual. I utilized it to, I'm a mechanic, but I use it to buy seeds for my farm, you know. So in terms of registration, we noticed that was a significant flaw. So if you talk about uplifting the mechanics, level of mechanics or the level of carpenters in this country, then that becomes a very big challenge. When you talk of it at an individual level, then you'll say, okay, there could be an individual benefit that some of them have been able to achieve itself.
Okay, well, if we talk about pointing fingers, you know you're involving microfinance support center. Parliament is involved in a way because you are the members of Parliament, but also government and Minister of Finance, which disperse the money. Where should we point the fingers at? Maybe you fell short of what you were expected to do, and what should we do now? Because already money is there, people are embezzling it, people are using it. What should we do now?
Yeah, you see, the first thing we need to do is to prevent further loss of funds where it has occurred. In districts or constituencies or circles where there's already loss of funds, those accounts ideally should be frozen. No further transaction should take place. That is the first step we need to, because why I'm saying that, there are people who also saved their money and did not get any loan and want their savings, but the accounts are dry. So we need to protect further loss of funds, and that is also protecting the government, because somebody who saved 2 million and the account only has 200,000, didn't borrow, will definitely be demanding that 2 million shillings from that circle itself, and who is supposed to pay that? So that is the first step that needs to be done. The second step that needs to be done, we need to restructure the way the monitoring is done. The current monitoring is that you have the district commercial officer and then the RDC. Already it's a faulted design, because the district commercial officer administratively reports to the COW, not to the RDC. So because of that, the powers in the hands of the district commercial officers was very, very high, and they're able to proceed with impunity. We need to restructure that as quickly as possible. That is the second thing. The third thing, they need to relook again the repayment periods, the recovery plans, but also validate the different associations and the groups. If you are claiming to be a mechanic circle, how many associations are there that actually have mechanics? How many associations are there that have carpenters? How many that have actually tailors? We need to do some kind of screening process so that we say that for us to move forward now, these are the current associations or circles that we vetted and found that actually are complying, you know, and thereafter now we begin to proceed with only that segment itself, while the other segment, then money should be recovered but no further funds should be given to them until they comply. Those interventions need to come in immediately. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of loss of funds further taking place.
Just to recover the funds away from the prostitutions, would you recommend also maybe the property be attached for those who embezzle the money, for those who are involved in in the abuse of these emyooga funds? Maybe that will also help to recover the money, but also to show as be exemplary to those who would want also to embezzle this money.
You see, recovery is very, very important at the level of those who embezzled, but also at even those who borrowed those funds. We need to make sure that whoever borrowed money repays it back, because this is a revolving fund. And it will be very difficult for Parliament to say, let us again approve more funds for emyooga, when even the ones that already released have not been recovered itself. You know, so the recommendations that we've made, that's why we said these people should be held culpable. The funds that are stolen have to be refunded. We shouldn't just look at prosecution only, because you know prosecution can take 5 to 10 years.
I've seen
the money is needed today.
Okay, as Parliament, you are now reporting back to the floor of Parliament, just how this money was dispersed, how it was utilized. At least the process is still ongoing. Would we also see you as members of Parliament speak as firmly as you are speaking now? Because many times people will say, these members of Parliament, they also allocate themselves money, maybe to buy vehicles, maybe they also abuse taxpayers' money. But when it comes to how we use our money, our taxpayers' money, they are so firm, but they turn the eye away from them, but then turn it against us. We are all using taxpayers' money.
Yeah, you see, we need to understand that one of the roles of Parliament that people have not talked so much about is oversight. What we did in emyooga is actually one of the key roles of Parliament. Oversight of the budgets that have been appropriated. We've been doing a lot of legislation, a lot of people representation, a lot of budget appropriation, but oversight is very critical. And when you talk about the cars that you're given, the purpose of those cars is actually what we use for the oversight activities that we undertook within those different regions, because Parliament did not give us any vehicles to go and use for that. They did not provide any fuel. The members of Parliament had to use their vehicles, they had to use their fuel, they had to use the facilitation that is provided to them by Parliament itself. And so it's only fair enough that at the end of it we come up with a report and show the country what we observe. But again, I need to say that oversight should not be post-mortem based. It should be pre-mortem. In other words, before all these problems happen, we should already be on the ground.
That is very good, especially now that it's the time that we are supposed to be going to that disbursement or the rolling out of the PDM, the Parish Development Model. This is a time that where we need you most as members of Parliament. Before this program that was approved in the 10th Parliament, before it's rolled out, what would be the responsibility of you, the members of Parliament, but also to show the world that something is amiss somewhere?
Yeah, it's very, very important that this emyooga program feeds into the parish model. And let me take you back a bit that we also had the youth livelihood program.
Sure.
When you look at the emyooga program, they simply sort of duplicated the same with a few modifications. There should have been a fundamental overhaul when it came to the youth livelihood program being translated into the emyooga program. Now we're moving into the parish development model. And already what is coming out is that we should, as members of Parliament, as I said, do the pre-mortem, not the post-mortem. We need to be part of this process right from the start and ensure that as the funds are disbursed, we are also disbursing the guidelines, the structures which are robust. Because the problem we had was that a lot of the designs were done at the top. It was a top-bottom approach. We need more of a bottom-up approach level itself. And so this is very key and it's very timely that we've done this oversight. And I believe that there will be a lot of great resolutions that are going to make this parish model. Already even the feedback we're getting on the ground was that, you know, there are people who had started sharpening their knives to slaughter this parish development model animal. Now with the oversight that has been done, it has made people begin to realize that Parliament is no longer just going to watch from Kampala. They are going to come and watch from Kole district, from Aleptom district, from Lira district, what exactly is happening. And they will not come at the end. They will start right from the beginning itself.
And when you talk about these funds, relief funds for the vulnerable poor, in Kampala, in Wakiso, in Mukono, many reports were released about the flows that Of course, we know the politicians were not involved in this because they use the technical people, but still you have Lira City, a part of the Lango region. What was the report for this vulnerable money for the vulnerable poor?
Yeah, well, from a positive note, Lira came out to be one of the cities that had actually greatly implemented the process itself. Again, when you notice that the biggest flows start from registration. That's the same thing also with emyooga. The registration is the most critical point that determines the success or the failure. The moment you register the wrong people, then those are not the vulnerable. The wrong people receive the whatever. And from Lira perspective, they did quite a great job, and I commend them for that. But also, it also shows that it's also necessary to have very strong leadership to be in place to ensure that some of these initiatives come out as successful. But also remember, the other aspect about this vulnerable money was that there were cashless transactions. In other words, money will move from an account directly into your phone. In emyooga, it was different. Somebody goes and withdraws money from the bank, comes and brings 40 million shillings, and then he says there's 10 million here, distribute as the chairperson. And the chairperson has 10 million. This is somebody who has never handled 100,000 shillings in his life. He has 10 million shillings in his hands, and he has to disburse. So there are learnings from there that cashless transactions needs to be strongly reinforced if the intended beneficiaries have to receive.
When you talk about these transactions, we have different programs. You have the Operation Wealth Creation, you had the Ntandikwa program, all these trying to uplift the standards of the people, but we don't have the streamlined policies and plans, or plans are there, but no laws particularly targeting these people. Tomorrow we may even wake up with another program, maybe call it another name, and then disperse the money the way we want. Maybe it's election time, maybe it's just maybe in mid-term. Shouldn't you as members of parliament come up with maybe these streamlined policies that whenever you bring up such a program, maybe January, maybe December, maybe next year, this is how you're supposed to handle it, supposed to distribute the money, not maybe cash, maybe just transactions through non-monetary plans. Shouldn't you do something as members of parliament that when these programs come, there's something you're doing that is evident?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand these programs are key because they're interventions in COVID for the socio-economic impact, they're interventions on poverty, operational interventions in agriculture, and so they're great initiatives. But what we need is policy that guides, irrespective of whatever program, and I'm speaking this not just for the parish development or the emyooga, but even the program that will come in 3, 4, 5, 10 years later. There has to be a program policy document that guides how beneficiaries, because when you look at all these programs, there are certain things that are very uniform. There are always beneficiaries. There's always a process of registering the beneficiaries. There's always a process of paying them. So there are standardized processes that cut across. There are standardized processes that cut across the leadership, the financing, the registration, the implementation. So I believe that one of the key outcomes that Parliament will come up is to have that kind of policy document that is developed. And it should not be, one of the problems we had is that these programs come under different ministries. But this time it should be driven under the ministry of the Office of the Prime Minister, because that's where all those ministries fall. So if the Office of the Prime Minister has that guiding document, then all the other ministries will have to comply with it. So that before even the funds are released to the ground, we know that this guiding process has been gone. One critical process has been piloting. If you ask what is the extent of piloting of these programs, it's a big challenge. Where was the emyooga program piloted before it was massively rolled out, So that policy guiding document is very, very key for us to achieve that.
Okay, let's also talk about COVID-19, because you as a doctor, you are also part of the team that was sent by Parliament to Northern Uganda to inspect and make sure that, yes, efforts of fighting COVID-19 are implemented, but also afford to the dot. Just give us a mini report for you. What were you able to find in Northern Uganda, and what is being done for now to ensure that, yes, we successfully fight this battle?
Yeah, so we're basically supposed to assess the level of preparedness and the response What we found is that there's a response plan at the national level. There's also a response plan at the district level. There's surveillance activities ongoing, people picking samples and testing. We found vaccination ongoing, and actually the uptake was quite high itself. So the response plan was being implemented well. However, we found that there was still a lot of challenges that were involved inside there, especially at the lowest level, at the village levels. You know, for example, an issue like home-based care. They say you're supposed to stay in your home if you're detected to have mild or moderate cases, but they're actually homeless people. There are people who stay in one-roomed houses. How are you going to isolate? You know, so we found there were those challenges. We found the challenges of treatment centers, whereas the regional referral hospital, the gazetted areas, their health center falls and district hospitals are actually offering COVID-19 treatment. And they started that as their own initiative, because whenever they will refer patients to the regional referrals, the spaces will be full, the beds will be full, and they will be referred backwards. You know, so it came in as an intervention. But most importantly, the issue of mass vaccination. That is an area that we strongly emphasize. You see, lockdown does not lock down the virus. It only gives you time to build capacity for you to make an intervention. We've completed the second wave. We've already indications that there could be a third wave. But we should not wait for a third. You know, a wave does not start as one wave. It first spreads, then is when it's called a wave. We should not wait for a wave that has started in Lira district to spread to Kole, to spread to other districts. We should intercept them. And it is important now that government begins to think of regional and district intervention. Do we wait until the whole country now cases have skyrocketed, or we begin to intervene even when Kole has cases have skyrocketed and we put a lockdown in Kole alone, without affecting all the others, or without the Kole having the virus transmitted to others.
Okay, 30 seconds, your last word to the viewers.
Yeah, so what we want to say is that as Parliament, I think this 11th Parliament, one of the key areas that we're strongly going to advocate for is very strong oversight, budget oversight. Remember, we have a budget of about 44 trillion that has been approved for this financial year. It's very important that Parliament goes on the ground to ensure, and I think that has already started.
Thank you so much, Dr. Honorable Dr. Samuel Opio Achuti, the Kole North MP in Kole District. Of course, we've been talking about money and other relevant issues. I hope you picked something, and I hope all who are concerned about the emyooga funds will take note of whatever he has been talking about, and those in the report he tabled before the Parliament of Uganda. Stephen Imbide Mfefeswe Chibuga, and have now hand you back to Andrew Chamagero in the studios.